In the spirit of its namesake, Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology provides an affordable path to learning with hands-on skills. But as it plans on a move from the South End to Roxbury, it's facing more financial pressures, like many other small colleges. Among the possible solutions being considered are a merger with Wentworth Institute of Technology or more dovetailing with other schools and partner agencies. These were among the reasons for a virtual conversation between Ben Franklin administrators and local officials, including our guest, the president of the Boston City Council and district representative from Roxbury, Kim Janey. Thank you very much for being with us, Madam President.
It's great to be here, Chris. Thank you so much.
I want to start off with something that you're very familiar with, and certainly I've heard about before, and that is, who are the students that this Benjamin Franklin Institute serves?
Thank you, Chris. So this is the Benjamin Franklin Institute. It's currently located in the South End and plans to move into Nubian Square. This institute largely serves men of color. It's one of the few institutions of higher ed in the Commonwealth that has a very diverse student body in terms of serving students of color, particularly men of color. So it's important that we make sure that this institution is with us for a very long time.
And they're accessible partly because of the cost for students, but I think also because they have some close relationships, even with the Boston Public Schools, right?
Yes, and so they do have a number of relationships with schools. They provide certificates, various certificates and degrees that really help people get good jobs. And so again, we need to make sure that this institution survives. We've seen too many times where smaller colleges are either going completely out of business or they're getting swallowed up by larger institutions and then are losing their ability to maintain their mission. And so if Ben Franklin Institute does merge with Wentworth, it is extremely important to make sure that their mission of serving men of color continues.
Well, one of the things that you and Senator Chang Diaz heard in the recent conversation with the administrators from Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology is that they're losing money right now. It sounded kind of concerning, didn't it?
Oh, it's very concerning. And again, they're not alone. Like so many of the smaller institutions of higher learning, they are struggling financially. And so I think it's important that we as a city, if we believe that this institution is important, and I would argue yes, that we need to make sure that it continues. So one of the things that I think would be important is to see industry. This is an institution that is training men to go into different fields. We need to see those industries come and invest now. So come invest on the front end as someone is trying to get trained and get certified to come work for a company. They need to invest on the front end rather than just getting that job for that individual and letting that person pay back loans. We need more investment into the institute.
And of course, the reason is that there's this gap between what those students can pay and what the education or workforce development costs.
Yes, yes, yes. And so we need to make sure that we're covering that gap. And I would love to see, and I've had some conversation with the mayor, and I know the mayor is interested as well, making sure that there is more investment from private industry into the Ben Franklin Institute. If Ben Franklin merges, and that means they may not come into Nubian Square. If they don't come into Nubian Square, there is a ripple effect in terms of that impact. That means that another parcel stays blighted. It means those jobs that were going to come, the construction jobs won't come. It means the permanent jobs that would come will not be there. So there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot at stake here.
I want to rewind a little bit because when the college announced that it was going to be moving from the South End to Nubian Square, I think a lot of people were happy with that. What was the potential you saw from that move?
I mean, I think people were happy, one, because it was Ben Franklin Institute of Technology. So this is an institute that has already been serving many folks in this community. Given who they serve in terms of their student body. People also saw the opportunity to have a parcel, and this is not an empty parcel of land, this was just an old blighted building, But to have that be brought to life, there is a lot of energy and a lot of desire to make sure that the businesses in the square are being supported, that the people who live in the square, that we create this vibrancy without displacing residents. And I think people looked to this particular project as being a good project for the square that would bring jobs, that the Institute itself is serving the community already in terms of its student body. So it just seemed like a good fit.
I want to ask you about some of the uniqueness of Benjamin Franklin Institute for Technology. This is not just another small private college that can do whatever it wants. There's a sort of a public mission that's baked into the school, isn't there?
Yes, and I'm not on the board and I don't work for Ben Franklin Institute, so I won't speak to that. But just given the namesake alone, you should know that this college was created with money that Ben Franklin himself put aside for the public good. And it's important that we continue that tradition, especially given of who this college serves, how difficult it is for individuals to attain a college degree at this time. I had a hearing, I think it was this week or maybe it was last week, just on college debt and how that is crippling families. And so we've got an institute that people can go get a certificate, get a degree at a lower cost, a much lower cost than some of those other private universities, that is largely serving Black and brown men. They were coming into Nubian Square. There was a lot of excitement, and now that is in jeopardy. And so that was the reason why we wanted to have the dialogue, to make sure that community members were aware of what was happening and what was at stake.
One thing that struck me from the conversation was one of the board members, Ron Dorsey, saying that they had a structural deficit that was basically a reflection of their business model and that it had to change. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think when you have these kinds of challenges and we're thinking about the survival of an institution, you've got to put everything on the table. And so I'm glad that the board members are really thinking about their model and whether or not they need to change to make it more efficient. I think you've got to put everything on the table.
Another thing that they mentioned was something called the Communiversity. I know you have a good background in education and advocacy. What do you think about that?
I mean, again, I think I think it's important that we make sure that we keep this institution alive, that we make sure that it continues to serve the people that it's serving. If we can bring the Institute to Nubian Square, I think that is great. And so I'm anxious to continue the conversations with Dr. Francis, with the board members, to make sure that they can do just that.
Of course, one of the other things that I was also paying attention to was they have deadline pressure. I mean, they don't just have to get some more money at some time. They're talking about things like either this year or next year. Does that worry you at all?
I think we all need to be worried, Chris. So the pressure, the financial pressures that this institution, certainly many others, but this institution is under, they're real. And given COVID, we know that COVID is exacerbating all of these tensions that we have. So we all should be concerned. And we are continuing our conversation. I continue to speak with Dr. Francis and members of the board around how we can move forward to get more investment from, I think, the industries here in Boston. We need companies and corporations to really invest in workers on the front end. And so I would love to figure out how we can get folks to support Ben Franklin Institute and make sure that it can survive.
Another educational question about things that had developed recently. You were among the city councilors to weigh in on what should be done about the admissions policy for exam schools this year. Could you tell us a little bit about your sense of what should be done?
Absolutely. So I wrote a letter to the former chair of the school committee to express my support for the one-year change, which would suspend the test and adopt the recommendations from the work group. The school committee did adopt those recommendations. I think that was the right thing to do. But for full disclosure, I think you know, Chris, from my advocacy in education, I'm a big believer that exam school admissions needed to change anyway. I still believe that. We need to have a new admissions policy for the 3 exam schools that looks at, perhaps looks at this one-year model, perhaps looks at different models that other towns, other municipalities across the country might be using, but we do need to revise the admissions policy at the exam schools to increase diversity at all 3 exam schools, particularly Boston Latin School.
One other educational question. I'm sure you're aware of parents of students with disabilities, high needs, very concerned about the loss of in-person education. Do you have any hope that there's something that can be worked out for them, even if it cannot be done for the other students?
Well, I continue to have hope. I've got to have hope. If you don't have hope, you kind of just want to jump off the side of a building. So I continue to have hope. I am deeply, deeply concerned and continue to be concerned that our most vulnerable students are not getting everything that they need. It is very difficult to deliver the types of services and supports that students with disabilities need through Zoom, through virtual learning and remote learning. So we need to get students back into the classroom. That being said, we need to make sure that our classrooms are in fact safe. So it is a delicate balance, but I am deeply concerned about how this is impacting our most vulnerable students.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here as always.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Boston City Council President Kim Janey.